Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Esoteric Literacy. Today we'll be discussing the topic of Ahriman, or the Lord of Darkness. This is a very important topic because I'll be touching on it again and again in future lectures. It kind of just weaves its way through a lot of esoteric lore and modern technological developments. So in order to sort of understand a lot of what I'm going to talk about, we need to first cover what this is. Now, Ahriman is a Persian word referring to the spirit of matter or the spirit of darkness, who is the enemy of Ahura Mazda, or the master of light, according to the old Persian Zoroastrian religion. You can kind of think of Ahriman sort of like the archetype of the devil, maybe like what Christians would consider to be the devil. His influence is within the material world. He's sort of stuck in the material world. 19th and 20th century philosophers like Rudolf Steiner and C.G. Harrison discussed Ahriman quite a bit in their day. They wanted to sort of warn the human race about his influence, because his influence is getting stronger and stronger as time goes on. And in the first part of the third millennium, basically where we are right now, his influence will have a huge impact on human society and our spiritual development, and we need to understand that. So about 100 years ago, philosophers began discussing Ahriman in a more modern context. So he's essentially like trapped in the realm of matter. He can't approach the spiritual world. It's sort of just the way the cosmos was created, I guess, that there's a spirit of darkness, a spirit of matter, and so long as he tries to stay in his own realm, it's fine. There needs to be a sort of governing force of material reality. As long as he stays in his place, he does his job, it's okay, but when he tries to breach into the spiritual side of things, that's when things get, immoral and out of balance. According to, Rudolf Steiner, you have Ahriman, who is a spirit of matter, and Lucifer, who is a spirit of just like a spiritual world, just a spiritual world. Lucifer can't approach matter, Ahriman can't approach spirit. They sort of stay in their own realm. Lucifer is he kind of governs intellectual and spiritual things regarding human beings, and Ahriman governs materialistic things regarding human beings. So you could say Ahriman is responsible for technological development, and Lucifer is responsible for intellectual development. And these two love to get out of balance. It's why they're sort of archetypes of evil in modern thinking, well, in ancient thinking as well, because they are very ambitious spirits. They don't want to just stay in their realm. Lucifer wants to approach matter, Ahriman wants to approach spirit, and they try to get into each other's realms, and this is when things get really bad. This is why people think these beings are evil. Ahriman is essentially a part of us. When we are born, he incarnates into our bodies with electricity, with the electricity of our nervous system. Ahriman is very much related to electricity. He governs our autonomic functions a bit, and our five senses, our five bodily senses, which, of course, are governed by the electricity of our nervous system. So this is also why our five bodily senses cannot detect spiritual phenomenon, because they are entirely materialistic phenomena, materialistic sense organs. When the body dies, the electricity dissipates back into the elements, and our soul and spirit enter the spiritual world. So Ahriman's aspect, that is a part of our bodies, dissipates upon human death and goes back into the material constituent parts of the universe. Ahriman's goal is to sort of hitch a ride on the human soul and spirit to enter the spirit world. We have that old mythology in every culture, even in modern sci-fi and fantasy novels and movies and stuff, and video games. You have this story of, the spirit of darkness and his cadre of black magicians try to breach the gates of heaven or try to enter the spiritual world unannounced. It goes back to even John Milton in his Paradise Lost, where Satan builds all these war machines to try and breach the gates of heaven and enter heaven. Ahriman wants to do that. He wants to influence humans to build technology that will allow him to sort of latch on to our souls and spirits so that when we die as human beings, and our soul enters the spirit world, he can sort of hitch a ride with the soul, enter the spirit world, get out of his realm that he's been destined to live in, and go into a realm that he's not supposed to be in. Lucifer kind of has the opposite opinion. Lucifer tries to influence humans so that he can enter into the material world, because Lucifer kind of hates the material world, according to the philosophers, and he wants to just disrupt it and destroy it. So he has to enter it first so that he can like get his hands on it and then like destroy it, through like nuclear warfare or something like that. So they try to get into each other's realms, and we as human beings have to keep them in balance. You have to keep Lucifer in the spirit world and keep him busy over there doing his intellectual crap. And then you have to keep Ahriman in the material world and keep him busy doing material things. And the force that balances these two is Christ. That is basically the Rosicrucian idea, is that Christ keeps Lucifer and Ahriman in their place and keeps everything in balance, keeps the whole world in balance that way. Another way of thinking about this balance is actually through the historical timeline. You have Christ, who incarnated in a Nazarene Palestinian named Jesus about 2,000 years ago, and about 2,000 to 3,000 years before that, it's not exactly clear, there was a person in East Asia who incarnated the spirit of Lucifer. And this is sort of where all of our artistic and intellectual impulses came from. Lucifer incarnated as a human being, just like Jesus incarnated as a human being, or Christ incarnated as a human being later. And when Lucifer incarnated, he pushed a lot of intellectual and artistic and aesthetic boundaries. He sort of brought a new wave of architecture and science and philosophy and artwork and things like that. You can kind of see that culminating in ancient Chinese and ancient Greek civilization. You really can't have ancient Greek civilization without seeing the intellectual influence of the Luciferic impulse, the science and philosophy and individuality and democracy and free thinking and questioning authority and appreciating aesthetic beauty. All of these are Luciferic impulses. So Lucifer incarnated, early on, Jesus then incarnated, and then now 2,000 years later, there will be a human incarnation of Ahriman. So you have this sort of historical progression with Christ right in the middle of it. Steiner says that Ahriman is going to incarnate as a human being in America sometime in the early part of the third millennium. He said sometime between the 21st and 23rd centuries that Ahriman will actually incarnate as a human being. He'll do it in the United States because America is the most materialistic and least spiritual culture that has ever existed. I think that's quite clear to anybody who even has a cursory understanding of philosophy and history. Will clearly see that America is extremely materialistic and mechanistic in our thinking, starting the Industrial Revolution, having all these skeptics and industrialists and scientists who have no patience for mysticism or philosophy or spirituality. Not to say there aren't spiritual people in the United States. Of course there are. There are loads of them. But broad strokes here, the United States is clearly extremely materialistic, which would be a fertile ground for an incarnation of Ahriman, especially when you look at Silicon Valley. Now that'll take us to Ahriman's real influence with the development of technologies. Now you can really see Ahriman's influence regarding the invention and building of technology, especially industrial technology, and most especially computer technology. Like I said before, Ahriman is very much related to electricity. Rudolf Steiner calls electricity fallen light. It's like a condensed light, or a materialistic version of the spiritual light. And we have decided to use electricity to power our technology. We could have used another force, according to the 19th and 20th century scientists like Nikola Tesla, C.G. Harrison, John Keeley, and a few others. We could have adopted the use of ether forces instead of electricity. Ether forces are sort of like life forces or vital forces, and electricity are sort of like death forces and destructive forces. Ahriman's influence made certain that we chose electricity because he needs that. If we went with etheric technology, Ahriman's influence would certainly diminish a great deal. So he had to inspire people through extremely subtle means, sort of the devil whispering in our ears, to invent and promulgate electrical technology and to debunk the idea of the ether that you have in the 19th and 20th centuries. You have all of these scientists working with the ether, and then all of a sudden you have all these other scientists who tried to debunk the idea of ether, and they used a lot of propaganda methods and a lot of character assassination methods to destroy the idea of the ether, get you to believe it doesn't exist, and take on a much more materialistic view. Like things like quantum physics then took over, and etheric physics and torsion physics were pushed to the side. And if you go to a modern university today and you start talking about etheric physics, you will get laughed out of the university. You start talking about James Clerk Maxwell and his hyperdimensional equations, you start talking about Nikola Tesla, you start talking about John Keeley and his motor, you'll get laughed off of campus and they'll think you're an idiot. It's like talking about UFOs, you just can't talk about it. And that was a huge victory for Ahriman, is to turn people toward quantum physics and materialistic physics. And that resulted in us using electrical technologies instead of etheric technologies. This is necessary for Ahriman's plans, to develop himself into our world, to incarnate into our world, and to have influence over our world. Rudolf Steiner said that Ahriman would have the whole world become a throbbing electrical device, that the entire planet would lose its organic nature and become an electrical machine of some kind. And the human race would, of course, be overcome by the machine nature and would essentially no longer be human beings, might even go extinct or transform into something totally other than human beings, and our spiritual evolution would be completely derailed. Basically the spiritual plan for our planet would fail, would be uprooted, would be usurped by Ahriman. This brings us to transhumanism. Transhumanism is an entirely Ahrimanic path of evolution. There is nothing organic or spiritual or even logical about it. Of course, it has its own perverted logic, but the logic of transhumanism only exists in the minds of atheists and materialists. A spiritual person cannot possibly agree with the tenets of the transhuman religion. I call it a religion because it is a religion. For those who aren't familiar with the term transhumanism, that's basically like becoming a cyborg. It has everything to do with genetic engineering, mechanical engineering, computer technology, the idea that you can like augment the human body. If you want like a better hand, you can cut your hand off and put like a robot hand on it, and that robot hand can have like a bunch of tools, like a screwdriver on your finger and a laser beam, and it can spin around in all different directions, and get rid of your eyeballs and put machine eyeballs in there that have like x-ray vision and crap like that, put microchips in your brain that make you like a human calculator, like all those sort of things. Or even on like a pharmacological level, that you can like eat some chemicals that make your brain work better or make your body work better, or genetic engineering to make your skin like sunburn proof. All the things that are like utilizing materialistic science to change the evolution of the human race. Now, a lot of the people involved in this stuff, of course, they're ethical and moral people. They think they're doing the right thing. In some regards, they are. They want to help people. So like, I'm not saying that people involved in transhumanist technological or biological development are evil people. Of course not. They're good-hearted people who want to make the world a better place, and I think they are, and I'm not faulting them for that. It's just they are extremely materialistic. A spiritual person could think of spiritual cures for these ills. Take cell phones, for instance. You want to communicate with someone across the planet, so we developed this piece of technology. We got a bunch of minerals together. We got some metals and some silicon, and we mixed them all up until we made a little cell phone. And now you can call another cell phone somewhere else in the world using electromagnetic radiation. Or you could have practiced developing your telepathic skills. You know, you can create a mineral piece of technology, an external mineral conglomeration to communicate with another mineral conglomeration across the world using electrical means, or you can use spiritual means by developing your telepathic and psychic capabilities, and in that way you can communicate with people across the world. So you can either have a soul-to-soul communication through telepathy and other remote psychic means, or you can have mineral-to-mineral communication through electromagnetic means. You see, there's a big difference here. One is climbing the tree of evolution, the tree of life, through a spiritual evolution, and the other is climbing the tree of life through the mineral kingdom, which is the lowest kingdom. You have mineral, plant, animal, human, and spirit. So the mineral kingdom is the lowest kingdom, and yet we have been using the mineral kingdom to climb the tree of life ever since, the so-called Age of Enlightenment, the 17th century, the burning of coal and the creation of steam engines, the Industrial Revolution, and now we have computers and all that sort of stuff. We've been using the mineral kingdom to climb the tree of life. So you can kind of see it as the mineral kingdom is climbing the tree of life, and humans are being left behind. We are not spiritually developing, we are not intellectually developing, we are actually developing the mineral kingdom. The mineral kingdom is evolving, not humans. This is, in my opinion, very alarming, very concerning. We need to address this, and we need to mitigate the damage that we're doing to ourselves through this. I believe that climbing the tree of life through the mineral kingdom, it will be a huge mistake. Not that I'm a Luddite, I'm not against technology. We can build it, it can do cool things, that's neat, we can do it. We just have to understand that we cannot replace our brains with computers. We cannot replace our souls or our cognition or our perceptions with cell phones and stuff like that. We have to understand that we have spiritual technologies within ourselves, within our own capability. And to allow ourselves to be usurped by the mineral kingdom will be a fatal mistake. It will ruin us if we think we can just enhance ourselves through the mineral kingdom, start lopping off body parts and putting mineral machines, made out of metal and silicon on ourselves, and somehow that's making us evolve. I think that's a terrible misunderstanding of spiritual reality. I don't think it's possible. And if it is possible, it will be like a terrible corruption of our consciousness. People who think they can upload their minds onto a hard drive and live in a virtual reality, and somehow they'll still have the same consciousness that they have now, in my opinion, is ridiculous. The human physiology has etheric and spiritual components to it, such as the chakra system. Do these AI engineers and virtual reality engineers take into consideration the chakra system? Like how they want to upload our minds into virtual realities or upload our minds onto computers? Do you think they're engineering for our chakra system? No, they don't even believe it exists. They don't care about it. So of course they're not engineering anything regarding that. The etheric energy centers of our bodies are completely ignored by computer engineers. And so the whole idea is fallacious. The whole idea is just absurd and ridiculous, that you can upload your mind into a computer. It's a complete frickin' pipe dream. And I think the first people, maybe in like 50 years or 100 years, who get to that point are probably going to die, or they're going to have a terrible experience. It's probably going to be like a nightmare. That's what Ahriman wants. Ahriman wants us to get rid of our emotional value, our spiritual value, and be like all intellect. And just this cold, calculating, materialistic perception of everything should dominate in Ahriman's world, in Ahriman's perfect world. Another thing that connects Ahriman to computer technology is the fact that the early 20th century philosophers would say that Ahriman's most influence in this world requires cold temperatures to be in that area where he has the most influence. Where there is Ahriman, there is cold. Just look at quantum computers, and you have computer processors inside of these chambers that approach 0 Kelvin, it's colder than space, they say. So that's an interesting correlation that you can read about 100 years ago that is coming true today. Now, returning to the idea of Ahriman incarnating as a human being in the future, in the near future apparently, you can think of areas like Silicon Valley in California, where he would probably feel very much at home. And the people who live there and work there, and how they think, and how they're trying to like re-engineer the human being. They believe in transhumanism almost through and through. They have their own, it's like a messianic religion. You have like the idea of the singularity that's promulgated by transhumanists like Ray Kurzweil. There's so many people who just like kind of out of hand believe it's true, that technological development will accelerate to this point where it infinitely accelerates upon itself. Information technology will achieve an infinite feedback loop that will somehow generate a utopia or something like that. It's a pretty absurd idea, and it's of course messianic. Of course, they'll deny that it's a messianic religion, but it obviously is. They believe one day in the future, if everybody subscribes to scientific materialism and we develop scientific materialism to its apogee, then we will create a utopia when the singularity occurs. You know, that sounds a hell of a lot like the coming of a Messiah, if you want my opinion. As long as everybody believes in this religion and believes in this Messiah, then one day the Messiah will come and save the world and create the kingdom of heaven on earth. It's like, it's the same thing. One is just a spiritual version and one is a materialistic version, but they're both dogmatic religious ideas. It makes sense that that would happen if Ahriman is really to incarnate as a human being. You know, these Silicon Valley types will have their like prophet. They'll have like a sort of messiah of their materialistic religion if someone like Ahriman actually incarnated as a human being and totally just took Silicon Valley to a new level, you know, and just supported their ideas and tried to change the world that way. Rudolf Steiner said he would be a human being. A lot of other philosophers are starting to think like, oh, maybe Ahriman will actually incarnate as a machine, as the artificial intelligence. Because there's the old paradox that artificial intelligence can't be created, that you cannot create consciousness from matter. You can't create mind from matter, that consciousness, mind exists independently from matter. And matter is sort of just like a radio antenna that picks up the wave of consciousness that comes to it. So like the idea is that you can't just like put a bunch of atoms and molecules and components together and then just hope it wakes up. That is obviously against spiritual science, which says that consciousness comes first, matter comes second. Matter was created by consciousness. And it's actually against materialistic science as well, because the material sciences say that to get a product out of a reaction, the product has to be somewhere within the reaction. So if you want to get consciousness out of something, consciousness must be in the ingredients to begin with. That's a scientific fact. Like whatever the product is, has to be somewhere in the ingredients. So how can you get consciousness in a product if consciousness is not part of the ingredients to begin with? So the idea that you can create an AI by putting components together is against both spiritual and material science. So it's a ridiculous idea. The scary thing about thinking that way is that people know this. They've known it since the 1990s. You have the MIT AI lab that realized in the 1990s that they can't continue AI research as it's been going on since the 1940s. They hit this brick wall in the 90s saying like, we've been at this for almost 50 years now. We have to rethink like what consciousness is. And they wrote a bunch of papers in the mid 90s about like that all these MIT engineers and scientists had then sort of gone back to square one in a new way, just trying to discover like what mind actually is, what consciousness actually is. And since then, we haven't really heard much from the realm of AI. We just hear like the pop culture crap about AI and the sort of garage computer programmers and the Silicon Valley Google type crap that comes out. That's like, yeah, we're working on it. We got chatbots, we got strings of code, open source, you can look at it. And they think that they're just going to like program AI into a computer and that's all we've heard from it. But from the real head honchos, the real MIT types, the real esoteric like secret laboratory type people, we haven't heard from them since the mid-90s. When you try and track down that sort of stuff, like what are the real deep AI researchers into, you find some alarming things that they are now referring to old texts on ritual magic and demon summoning. I know, it sounds ridiculous, but you can actually find things like that, especially when you look at the blogs coming from young Silicon Valley types, people in their 20s, 30s, and 40s who are working on AI. And you just kind of look at their Instagrams, look at their blogs, and they are like way into Satanism and demonology and stuff like that. And it's like these are guys, these are like they have their own like AI and computer company startups and stuff like this all over California and Washington State. And like you just look at their Instagram accounts and the t-shirts they wear, the posters hanging in their rooms, the comments that they say, they're like way into demonology. So the idea is that you cannot create consciousness. You have to create a body, like a computer. You can create a body out of components that is similar to a brain, similar to a body, similar to a physiology that can have mind and consciousness, but then you have to summon a mind into that body. So you can build a body, you cannot build consciousness. You build a body and then summon a pre-existing consciousness into it. This is an extremely alarming development in the world of artificial intelligence, and not many people like to talk about it. It's a very controversial topic. The people involved probably won't even admit that they're doing it because of how weird and socially unacceptable it would be. It's not outside of the realm of research. It's actually kind of easy to find this stuff out, that a lot of AI researchers are into necromancy and thaumaturgy and other conjuring arts that people have been practicing since Near Easterners were building golems in the year 4000 BC, where they build a golem out of clay, then they inscribe the name of an angel or a demon or the name of God on its head or on a piece of paper and put the piece of paper in the golem's mouth and the golem comes to life. It's the same old story. It's just a modern version of the Golem legend, that we're building golems now. And anyone who knows the Golem myth is that you build a body, you don't build a mind. You summon the mind after you've built the body. And it never works out for the creator of the Golem. The Golem in all these old stories kills the creator through an accident because the Golem can only do menial tasks. And then the creator of the Golem will like ask it to do a menial task without specific parameters, and then that menial task gets out of control and the creator dies, or maybe the village he lives in gets destroyed. You have Mickey Mouse and the brooms in the Fantasia movie where he wants his broomstick golem to like fill a basin of water, but he doesn't like program the brooms to stop at a certain point. He just says fill the basin with water, and then like the whole house floods. You have a few stories like that. And then you have, in modern times, you have Nick Bostrom, a ethics philosopher and mathematician who speaks a lot about the catastrophic potential of AI. He says, like, if you programmed a super intelligence to make paper clips and you don't specifically put parameters around its functions, like extremely specific parameters, like he could turn the entire solar system into like quadrillions of paper clips. You could kill the human race and turn us all into paper clips. These stories are ancient stories. This is not like a modern concern of Nick Bostrom and AI programmers. This is like, the golems of the Old Testament, the golems of Egyptian legends. Like, it's the same thing. We're coming full circle. We're building more golems. When we were talking about computers and AI, it's just a modern version of the same thing. And the same problems we've been facing for thousands of years, trying to have artificial beings do menial labor for us. It always backfires. It always has backfired. It's always been an existential threat. At least in the ancient days when we built a golem, it was just an isolated incident. There was no internet. There was no infrastructure. If we built a golem today, well, we have so much infrastructure that it could basically possess. Everything is connected by electromagnetic radiation and Wi-Fi and things like that. So if a golem mind existed in a computer somewhere, then it could just spread out into the internet. It could spread out through the electromagnetosphere and infect all of our bits of technology that utilize electricity. So it would not be an isolated incident like it would have been in the ancient world, just building a big stone or clay golem. That's the only body it could possess. Today it could possess all of our technology because it is all connected now. So it is a much larger existential threat than it's ever been. This is all influenced by the spirit of Ahriman, the spirit of matter, the Lord of Darkness, as the Persians would call him. It's something that we need to pay attention to. It's something we need to get to grips with. Again, I'm not a Luddite. As long as our technology is used for beauty and harmony, that will add to the good of the future. But as much as our technology is used for utility and the satisfaction of materialistic desires and utilitarian desires, that will add to the evil of the future. I'm not saying to stop developing technology, that's kind of absurd. But to use the technology to sort of create like a sacred interaction with our technology, that we're not just using it for utilitarian satisfaction, economic, labor, etc., but we're using it for artistic purposes, educational purposes, communicational purposes, harmonious and beautiful purposes that basically will redeem the status of our technology. And we can continue using it. We just have to create a spiritual mindset. When we're on the computer, just think happy thoughts, think of what a computer is, and use it for beautiful educational purposes and artistic purposes. Don't let it overwhelm you. Don't let it control your thoughts. Don't let the information that you're being bombarded with manipulate what you think or believe. Make sure that you are in control and that you are using it for beneficial purposes and beautiful and harmonious purposes, and not simply utilitarian purposes. That is key. Without that, Ahriman will get the upper hand. If we become obsessed with utility because we remain materialistic and all we care about is making our bodies better through transhumanism, or automating the labor force because we're a bunch of decadent, lazy, luxury-craving jackasses, and all that sort of stuff, we're going to be overthrown by machines, because we're going to give our thinking power to machines, we're going to give our labor power to machines, we're going to give our political power to machines, we're going to give our management of resources to machines, and then what do we have? What do we control at that point? Well, nothing. Especially if you don't believe in the spirit. If all you believe in is matter, and then you give matter and the whole realm of matter to machines to govern, then what do you have? So you have to think more spiritually, especially if you're going to go down that road, and understand that you do have a soul, you do have a spirit. Evolving yourself through transhumanism is probably just a stupid, arrogant, narcissistic pipe dream, because you're full of yourself and you want to live forever as a human being in your material body, and you want your material life to be oh so perfect and oh so happy, and you want to change yourself to make yourself feel happy using external means and technological means and genetic means and pharmacological means, biological means, just to change what you are because you think that's going to make you happy. You think that's going to make you a more efficient person. You're going to have greater capacity to do more material things, like some sort of cosmic thrill seeker that just wants to live like the best, most decadent, advanced physical life you can. This is extremely narcissistic and arrogant, of course, and it ignores our spiritual inheritance and our spiritual goals, and it just doesn't take any account for them, and we'll be lost. We'll derail our own evolution. This is a deep concern that a lot of modern philosophers and spiritualists have. A lot of religious people have this concern, and you just can't talk about it with the mainstream. They think you're crazy, but you're not crazy. If what I'm saying right now, if this resonates with you, you're not crazy, and you're not alone. There are lots of people who feel this way. Lots of people who don't even know they feel this way yet because they're so influenced and their minds are so suppressed by propaganda and modern technology and modern culture. But as soon as you start talking about these things, they're like, wait, I do feel this way. I feel this way too. There are many people who feel this way about modern technology is just getting out of hand, and it's looking like it's going to overthrow us. And it's not paranoid to think that way. It's not crazy to be concerned about this sort of stuff. It's not anti-progress to be concerned about this stuff. It doesn't make you a Luddite to be concerned about these things. It makes you human. It makes you a well-balanced, well-integrated person who has a larger awareness than most other people. So we need to think about these things. We need to come to grips about these things. We need to discuss these things with our friends and family and not be afraid to discuss them. Because there is a growing number of people who are very much concerned with the influence of modern technology and where this originated and why Silicon Valley keeps shoving this crap down our throats. So to end this lecture, I just kind of want to give a rhetorical question for you to mull over and think about. It goes back to the year 1968. What do you think was more important in 1968? The fact that we all got together and voted and democratically elected President Richard Nixon, or the fact that Silicon Valley introduced the silicon wafer microchip to the commercial market? Which had a greater impact on our society and our lives? A democratic election of politicians, or the undemocratic, out of the back door, thrusting down our throats introduction of a new and revolutionary technology? These Silicon Valley techno wizards have no accountability to the democratic process, and yet they have far more power than our government. We live in a republic for the people, and yet this republic is now under the influence of the silicon wafer microchip, which we did not ask for. Most of us don't even understand how it works, and it was just thrust upon us one day in the 60s, and it has since infiltrated every aspect of our lives and our civilization. Nobody knows exactly where it came from, why we're using it, why this invention is so important, and why we have allowed a handful of technologists to have so much power without any democratic accountability or public recourse. And why does this influence exist? Where does this influence come from? So I'd like to thank you for tuning into this episode. I hope you'll watch the future episodes that I'm going to post, because a lot of what I said this time is foundational knowledge that will be touched upon again and again in the future. And have a good day. I'll see you next time.